Naaman cured of leprosy. Now Naaman, commander of the army of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord gave victory to Syria. The man was mighty in strength and valor, but a leper. And the Syrians, lightly armed, had gone out on raids and brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet of God in Samaria, for he would expel his leprosy from him." And she went in and told her master, saying, "This is what the girl from the land of Israel said." Then the king of Syria said to Naaman, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 gold shekels, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I am sending Naaman my servant to you, so that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it came to pass, when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God, able to kill and make alive, to heal this man of his leprosy that this man sends to me? You perceive and see that this man is using this as a pretext for a quarrel with me." When Elisha the man of God heard the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent notice to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let Naaman come to me, and he shall know there is a prophet in Israel." Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and bathe in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became furious, and went away, saying, "Indeed, I told myself that Elisha would come out to greet me, that he would stand and call on the name of his God, and that he would put his hand upon the place and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Can I not bathe in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. Then his servants approached and said to him, "If the prophet were to tell you to do something great, would you not complete it? But here the prophet said to you, 'Bathe and be clean.'" So Naaman went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to Elisha's instruction, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was cleansed. Then he, with all his aides, returned to Elisha and came and stood before him, and he said, "Indeed, now I have come to know that in all the earth there is no God except the God of Israel. Now accept the gift of your servant." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." Again he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, "If not, then, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of red earth, for your servant will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord alone. And let the Lord be merciful with your servant, when my master goes there, to the house of Rimmon, to worship, he will rely on my hand, and I will worship in the house of Rimmon. In the worship in the house of Rimmon, may the Lord be merciful to your servant in this matter." Then Elisha said to Naaman, "Go in peace." He departed from him but a short distance. Then Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, said, "Behold, my master spared the Syrian Naaman, yet from his hand he received nothing of what he brought, but as the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something of his." So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he turned from the chariot to meet him. And Gehazi said, Peace. My master sent me saying, indeed, just now, 2 young men of the sons of the prophets came to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. Then Naaman said, Take 2 talents of silver. So Gehazi took 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to 2 of his servants. They left and carried them on ahead of him. As they entered into the darkness, he took them from their hands and stored them in the house. He then dismissed the men. Now he went in and stood before his master. And Elisha said to him, From where have you come, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant did not go anywhere. Then Elisha said to him, Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? And now you received the silver and the garments, and it shall happen that you shall receive from him gardens and olive groves and vineyards and sheep, and oxen and men servants and handmaidens. And the leprosy of Naaman shall also cling to you and your seed forever. Thus he went out from his presence leprous, like snow, the floating axe head. Then the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, See now, the strip of land where we dwell with you is too narrow for us. Please let us go to the river Jordan, and let every man take a log and build there a dwelling place. So he answered, Go. And one of them humbly requested, Come with your servants. And he replied, I will go. Then he went with them, and they came to the river Jordan and began to cut trees. But as one man was cutting a log, the iron axe head fell into the water. He cried out and said, Alas, master, it was borrowed. So the man of God said, Where did it fall? And he showed him the place. So he broke off a stick of wood and threw it in the water at the same place, and the iron axe head rose to the surface. Then Elisha said, Raise it up to yourself. So he reached down into the water and lifted it out. Defeat of Syria. Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, I shall encamp in this specific place. Then Elisha sent word to the king of Israel, saying, Be careful not to pass this place, for the Syrians are hidden there. In response, the king of Israel sent someone to this place which Elisha warned about, and thereby kept careful watch over the Syrians on more than 2 occasions. As a result, the king of Syria became troubled as to what was happening. He called his officers and said to them, Will you not tell me who gives advance warning of our movements to the king of Israel? And one of his officers said, No one, O Lord my king. It is Elisha the prophet in Israel that tells the words you speak in your bedroom to the king of Israel. So he said, Go, see where this man is, and I will send and kidnap him. They sent word to him, saying, Behold, he is in Dothan. So he sent horses and chariots, and a great army that arrived at night to surround the city. When Elisha's servant arose early and went out, the army was there, surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, O master, what shall we do? So he answered, Do not fear, for those who are with us are greater in number than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed, and said, Lord, open the eyes of the servant and let him see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he was now able to see, and he beheld the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Then the Syrians marched toward him, and Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike these people with blindness." And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. So Elisha said to them, "This is not the city, nor is this the way to it. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man you seek." But he led them away to Samaria. So it came to be, when they arrived in Samaria, Elisha said, "Lord, open their eyes and let them see." Thus the Lord completely restored their ability to see. And behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "O father, shall I not strike to kill them?" But he answered, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you took captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink and return to their lord." Then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he dismissed them and they departed to their lord. So lightly armed raiding parties of Syrians no longer came into the land of Israel. Notes from the previous page. 5:1 Regarding Naaman the stranger, Gentile, from Syria, see Luke 4:27. 5:10-11 Elisha did not so much as see Naaman, for though he perceived that Naaman was offended at his not coming out and touching him, observing the strictness of the law, he abides at home, and sends Naaman to the river Jordan to wash. Whereas the Lord to signify that he heals not as a servant but as absolute master doth also touch, Matthew 8:2, 3. For his hand did not take on the uncleanness of the leprosy, but instead the leprous body was rendered clean and renewed by his holy hand. For as we know, he came not to heal bodies only, but also to lead the soul unto self-control, John Chr. 5:14 It was not for nothing that Naaman of old, when suffering from leprosy, was purified upon his being baptized, but it served as an indication to us. For as we are lepers in sin, we are made clean by means of the sacred water and the invocation of the Lord, Iron. 5:15-19 See John 9, and compare Naaman's experience to that of the blind man. 5:1-27 Yes, and yet again his disciple Elisha, when Naaman the Syrian, who was diseased with leprosy, had come to him as a suppliant, cleanses the sick man by washing him in the Jordan, clearly indicating what should come, both by the use of water generally, and by the dipping in the river in particular. For Jordan alone of rivers, receiving in itself the first fruits of sanctification and benediction, conveyed in its channel to the whole world, as it were from some fount in the type afforded by itself, the grace of baptism. These then are indications, indeed an act of regeneration by baptism, Grg. New York. 5:27 Though he took not by violence, yet he did a wrong, for to get money by deceit is a wrong, John Chr. 6:1-7 The sons of the prophets were humble and impoverished, indicated by the borrowed. Acts 6:4-7 St. John Chrysostom indicates the water was a type of baptismal water, the axe head a type of one who is baptized, and the stick, a type of the cross. We who were drowning like iron in sin and death rise to new life in baptism through the cross of Jesus Christ and begin a journey to heaven. 6:6 This event is an indication of the fact that when the holy soul of Christ descended to Hades, many souls ascended and were seen in their bodies. For just as the wood, the lighter body, was submerged in the water, so the iron, the heavier one, floated. Thus, when the Word of God became one with flesh, by a physical and hypostatic union, the heavy and terrestrial body, having been rendered immortal, was borne up into heaven by the divine nature, after the resurrection. Iron 6:8-23 The Syrian king believed wrongly that the power of his earthly kingdom could contain and control the prophet of God. Syria besieges Samaria. And it came to pass that after this, the son of Hadad king of Syria gathered all the troops of his army and went up and besieged Samaria. There was a great famine in Samaria. Indeed, they besieged it even to the point where the value placed on the head of a donkey was 50 shekels of silver, and 2 quarts of dove droppings cost 5 shekels of silver. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Save me, my Lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord does not save you from the threshing floor or from the winepress, how can I save you?" Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you?" And she answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give us your son so that we may eat him today. And we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I told her, 'Give me your son so that we may eat him,' but she hid her son." Now when the king heard the woman's words, he tore his clothes, and as he passed by on the wall, the people saw that underneath his clothes he wore sackcloth on his body. Then he said, "God do so to me and more also, if the head of Elisha remains on him today." Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him, when the king sent a man ahead of him. But before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, "Do you see that this son of a murderer was sent to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door, and keep him on the outside of the door. Is that not the sound of his master's feet behind him?" While yet talking with them, behold, the messenger came down towards him, and the king said, "Listen. This evil is of the Lord, so why should I remain patient in the Lord?" Then Elisha said, "Hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, about this time tomorrow, at the gate of Samaria a measure of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and for a shekel, 2 measures of barley." So the officer on whose hand the king relied retorted to Elisha and said, "Look, even if the Lord in heaven will make a downpour of rain, this event shall not happen." And Elisha said, "Behold, you shall see this with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it." The Syrian army flees. Now at the entrance of the gate there were 4 leprous men. And one of them said to his neighbor, "Why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, 'Let us go into the city,' and there is famine in the city, we will die there. And if we sit here in this place, then we will die. Now, therefore, come, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians. If they keep us alive, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall die." So they rose in the darkness to head to the army camp of the Syrians. They entered the outskirts of the army camp and no one was there. For the Lord had caused the army of Syria to hear the noise of chariots and the noise of horses, the noises of a very great army. For the Lord made the army of Syria say to one another, "Look, the king of Israel hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to attack us." So they arose in the darkness and quietly fled for their lives, leaving their tents, their horses, and their donkeys at the campsite. And when these lepers came to the outskirts of the camp, they went into one tent and ate, and drank, and carried away from it silver and gold and clothing. Then they left and came back to enter another tent to take from there and to hide the spoils. And one said to the others, "This is not right. This day is a day of good news, and if we remain silent and wait until the light of morning, we will find wickedness in the city. Now come here. Let us enter the city and deliver this good news to the house of the king." So they went and cried out with a loud voice toward the gate of the city, and proclaimed to them, saying, "We entered the army camp of Syria, and behold, no one was there, not a man nor a human voice. The only things there were the tied up horses and donkeys, and their tents, which they left intact." Then the gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported to the house of the king inside. So the king arose in the night and said to his servants, "Now I will inform you as to what the Syrians are doing. They know we are hungry." Therefore they went out of the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, "When they come out of the city, we shall catch them alive and capture the city." Then one of his servants answered and said, "Indeed. Let them now take 5 of the remaining horses, of all that remain of the multitude of Israel, and send them there to see." Therefore they saddled 2 horses, and the king of Israel sent them after the king of Syria, saying, "Go and see." And they went after them even to the Jordan. Indeed, all along the way, the road was full of garments and vessels which the Syrians themselves cast away in the panic. So the messengers returned and brought word to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the army camp of Syria. And a measure of fine flour sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, true to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the officer, the one on whose hand the king relied, to have charge of the gate. But the people trampled him in the gate, and he died, as the man of God said who spoke when the king came down to him. So it happened just as Elisha said to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and a measure of fine flour for a shekel, shall be sold tomorrow about this time in the gate of Samaria. Then the officer had answered Elisha with this retort, "Look, even if the Lord in heaven should make a downpour of rain, this sort of thing would never happen." Then Elisha had answered, "In fact, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it." And so it was in this way, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. The Shunammite woman returns home. Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, "Arise, and go, you and your household, and stay wherever you can, for the Lord called for a famine on the land, and it will come upon the land for 7 years." So the woman arose, and both she and her house did according to the saying of Elisha. They sojourned in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, the woman returned from the land of the Philistines and went to make an appeal to the king for her house and for her land. Now the king spoke to Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, saying, "Tell me all the significant deeds Elisha has accomplished." And it came pass, as he was telling the king how Elisha restored her dead son to life, behold, the woman whose son Elisha had restored to life came crying to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, "My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life." So the king asked the woman, and she related this fully to him. Then The king told a certain eunuch, saying, "Restore all that was hers, and all the proceeds of the field from the day she left the land until now." Notes from the previous page. 6:17 Through the intercession of the prophet, Hebrews 1:14, the eyes of his newly tested servant, whose faith was yet easily shaken, became open to the divine presence surrounding him. In the divine liturgy, immediately before the gospel, we pray, "Open the eyes of our mind to the understanding of your gospel teaching." Saint Ambrose writes that Elisha's servant saw numberless hosts of angels. 7:1, 2 In the midst of man's unbelief, the Lord brings a promise of deliverance. Those who doubt God's power and authority will witness the fulfillment of the promise given, but will not participate in it. The prophecy comes to pass in 7:18, 20. 7:15-16 The word of the Lord proves true and lasting, while the kingdoms of this fallen world pass away. Matthew 24:35, 1 Corinthians 1:9, 1 Thessalonians 5:24, 1 Peter 1:25.